The original 24-105mm EF-L lens has been labelled by some as the most versatile, all-round workhorse lens that Canon has ever produced. This is actually the first iteration of the 24-105mm EF lens, which I've been using for several years and is still going strong. Now there is a Mark II version of the EF mount and is built slightly better than this, but for this video we're going to be using the original and we're going to be comparing it to this, the 24-105 RF version. Now considering that Canon is fully invested in their R series cameras and moving away from the older EF mount, how do these two lenses compare side by side for photo and video, and is the upgrade worth it? Particularly if you own an RF camera and are currently using the EF version with an adapter. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Kai, and today we're looking at these two incredible lenses, the 24-105mm original EF and RF versions. Now, the original EF mount was released way back in October of 2005. The second version of the EF mount came out in August of 2016, while the RF mount was released in 2018. So quite a bit of time between the original and the RF being released. When it comes to ergonomics, both of these lenses feel solid and sturdy in your hand, although the newer RF line have that matte finish and certainly complement the look of the newer R bodies. Now both of these lenses have image stabilization, making them really useful for run and gun situations. Both of them are weather sealed for wet conditions. They both have a 77mm thread for your filters. Weight-wise, the RF comes in at 695 grams. The EF version is slightly lighter at 670 grams, but if you're going to be using it with the RF to EF adapter, then you'll need to add on an additional 125 grams, putting this combination at around 795 grams in total. Now, an issue the original EF mount experienced is something called lens creep, which can actually be very annoying. And this is where you angle the lens down and gravity starts to pull the lens out further, although not in this case. So you can see there that gravity starts to pull the lens out further, so it has this zoom effect, and you need to actually hold the zoom ring in place with your finger or your thumb to stop that from happening. This is fixed in the second revision of this lens, as well as the RF version of this lens, which both have a lock switch to stop that lens creep from happening. The RF version also has a control ring at the front here, and this can be set up in the menu system of your Canon camera and can be used to control different parameters like the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. Now that focal range of 24-105mm is pretty versatile. 24mm is quite wide on a full frame camera, and 105mm is quite a fair amount of zoom. So straight away, using one of these lenses, you're going to get a range of different types of shots. And that's really awesome, particularly if you're trying to reduce the amount of gear that you carry around. So both of these are the Swiss Army knife of Canon lenses, and they can be used for sports, portraits, and landscape photography. Now this particular EF version was the first L lens that I invested in when I was still using my Canon 550D crop frame camera back in 2015. And I use this lens for absolutely everything. Wedding films, interviews, corporate events, promo content, literally everything. So let's compare the newer RF version here to the older EF mount throughout those focal lengths on the Canon EOS R and see what they look like. this is a great place to mention that if you haven't done so already, don't forget to add yourself to the KaiCreative Facebook and Instagram feeds, where you can stay up to date with all of our photography sessions, video productions, short films, camera reviews, and other creative happenings. And also, if you're a creative looking for unique music for your video productions, then I wanted to quickly let you know that Audio, which is the music licensing platform that I use, is currently offering $100 off their lifetime music membership. So if any of that interests you at all, find my link and the save code down in the description box below. Now, both of these lenses have a fixed aperture of f-stop 4 throughout the focal ranges from 24 to 105, which is really useful because you don't necessarily have to change your settings when you zoom in or zoom out. However, that maximum f-stop number can be a little bit of a pain point, particularly when you hit low light scenarios, but it really does depend on the sensor that you're pairing it with. On crop frame cameras like the 550D, I did get grain in low light at ISOs over 1600 even with this lens. But on full frame cameras like the 5D Mark III and IV, I never really had any issues at all using the 24 to 105 EF mount at higher ISO values. So how does the RF lens compare against the EF in lower light conditions on the EOS R with higher ISOs? Well, let's have a look at some example videos side by side. Literally just being lit by one of my computer screens at the moment, and I'm shooting at 64,000 ISO on the EF lens, and now we're going to switch it over to the RF lens, so let's see how that looks. And this now is with the RF lens, so again shooting with the native RF lens 24 to 105 at 24mm in 4K at 6400 ISO, and of course f-stop 4, it's the fastest this lens goes. And I don't know how YouTube compression is going to affect any of these artifacts here, so it's going to be relatively noisy at 6400 ISO. So you can probably tell that the original 24 to 105mm EF-L lens is still pretty awesome. But is it awesome enough to hold on to and use with an adapter and not upgrade to the RF version, particularly if you have a Canon R-mount camera? Well, one big factor that will affect your decision making will no doubt be the cost of the lenses. The RF 24 to 105 will currently set you back $1,100 or £1,150 new from the Canon stores, and secondhand you're going to be looking at roughly $900 to $1,000 or about £700 to £1,000 depending on the condition. The original EF mount is no longer manufactured, so you can't buy a new one, but you can grab a second-hand model for about $300 to $400 roughly, or £300 to £400 in the UK. And the version 2 EF lens costs the same as the new RF lens, $1,100 or £1,150, or second-hand for around $700 to $800, about £600 to £750 roughly. Now, factoring in the Canon adapter, you will be looking at spending an extra $150, about £130 for this piece of kit. Although there are other brands out there selling adapters for a lot less, and in some cases you can get this bundled with the Canon R cameras. So you can actually pick up a second-hand original EF 24 to 105L lens and the EF to RF adapter for roughly half the cost of the new RF version. So what if you're already using the original EF lens and adapter combo with your R camera? Should you upgrade to the RF lens? That's the big question. Well, I think that if you're used to using EF glass with an adapter on your R mount camera, like I was, you will probably argue that the picture quality is fine. In fact, it's better than fine, it's great. And I guess the majority of people out there will agree with that. However, if you start using native RF glass for your photography and video work, the imperfections in the older EF version soon become more and more evident. And that's only because you now have something to compare it against. I guess it's the same when you go from working with a crop frame camera to a full frame camera. You will notice the difference once you've made the jump, and it's difficult to go back, especially if you're working with photo and footage all the time. You really want that extra improved quality. And if you think about it, the RF mount was created to be much closer to the sensor. It was made for the mirrorless system, whereas the EF mount, although it works well with the adapter, was never created originally to work on an R mount camera. And because of this, we do see softer images produced with the older EF glass. As I mentioned earlier, I bought this original EF mount back in 2015, and it's still part of my kit bag today, having used it on the 550D, the 60, the 5D Mark III and IV, and now the R cameras. It's far outlived my crop frame and full frame DSLR cameras, and I still use it today. And that just goes to prove that any investment in glass is an investment in the future. And if you're gradually upgrading from EF to the RF series, I'd say that it's well worth it. So what do you guys think? Are you using the EF and adapter combo on your R camera? Are you going to upgrade to the RF mount? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, if you found today's video useful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that little bell for notifications. So that's it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. All that I've got left to say is stay creative, stay safe, imagine, implement, and inspire. And I'll see you next time on KaiCreative.